Well, I'm back. And this time I thought about I would bring out my big, old, dusty book of American history. Well, truth of the matter is, that's not really a big, old, dusty book of American history. It's a book that my wife had, and it doesn't have any history in it. Well, I guess it's got family history in it, but what I'm here to talk to you about are the events that are going to lead up to the American Revolution. So this is one of those little chats that hopefully we'll have from time to time that will help you in understanding the things that took place that led up to the American Revolution. Don't worry, that was just something that fell in my garage. If you're wondering about my toe, I just want to let you know that when we get to World War I have some great film to show you all about trench foot. And trench foot is when your foot rots off. So just know you have that to look forward to later in the year. Well, back to the topic at hand, the American Revolution, or actually the events that are going to lead up to the American Revolution. We've discussed the fact that the American colonists had enjoyed incredible political freedom, and that they had used that incredible political freedom to enact law and establish rule, and for all intents and purposes, be self-governed. Well, in the middle of the 17th century, new British political leadership takes over, and the new British political leadership thinks, well, you know, the Americans have got too big for their britches. And so he decides that it's time to put the Americans in their place. And the best way to put the Americans in their place was to limit their independent rule. So he went about convincing the king and convincing Parliament to begin to restrict the rights. It's kind of like having a dog that's been allowed to run free, and then all of a sudden you have to try to confine that dog to a small lot. Or in this case, let's say that what they're doing is they're going to put a choker leash on the American colonists. And whenever you begin to restrict things, those individuals that are involved in it begin to fight back. And that's exactly what you begin to see the American colonists. Up until the middle of the 17th century, up until the middle of the 18th century, because we're talking about the 1700s, I'm sorry about that, the Americans were loyal British subjects. They, Benjamin Franklin absolutely adored the monarchy and had no intention. Here's one of our founding fathers who had no intention of ever resisting being anything but a British citizen, part of the subject to the British Crown. But all of a sudden they begin to restrict things. And they restrict things politically, and they restrict things economically. We've talked about mercantilism and what they had done to restrict the colonists' ability to trade, the colonists' ability to create manufacturing, even the colonists' ability to spread into the Western territories, which were so readily available. Then along came a long conflict in Europe, 7 Years' War. It's a conflict that erupts between two very, very old enemies, the French and the British. And this is going to be the first global war, and that war makes its way to the New World. And the British Crown sends troops, and the American colonists fight in this war, and the French are defeated. All of a sudden, Britain is an empire. It has the French lands. It's conquered French colonies around the world, and so it's got a lot going on for it, but it doesn't need troublemakers in the colonies, and it begins to restrict. Also, this war bankrupted the British Crown. They had no money, and so they came up with this bright idea. They said, you know what? The Americans cost us a lot of money to defend. It took us a lot of money. They should pay their fair share. And so the British Crown began to place taxes on the American colonists, a series of taxes. They taxed tea, they taxed legal documents known as the Stamp Act, they taxed sugar. And by doing all of this, they really began to tick off the American colonists. So the American colonists began to resist. Well, the more the American colonists began to push, the more the British pushed back. Something you need to understand, the Americans are yelling and screaming, well, they're being taxed without representation. But you've got to understand, Britain is not a real democracy at this point in time. None of her citizens, beyond the aristocracy, is represented in Parliament. Parliament is not a democratic body. So therefore, when we look at this, you need to understand that Britain is doing exactly what monarchies did during that period of history. They saw nothing wrong with what they were doing. It's the British colonists in the New World that are going to push back and push back and push back. And eventually that's going to erupt in a confrontation at Lexington Concord.